How we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here. Welcome back to another video. So we are on to engineering then. Let's get this leveled up as much as we can. This is an interesting profession as it is discovery based. If you've played with alchemy at all, you'll notice that with alchemy you throw herbs at a problem and sometimes you'll learn something new. Engineering is much the same. I've figured out a nice simple path to get us to about skill 40, but from 40 up to 100, especially if you want to power level this, your journey is going to be very different to other people's. And this is predominantly because what you might learn off this recipe list is different to what somebody else might learn, but I can help you with this process as much as I can. I've devised a little material list if you want to head to the auction house and buy a few bits and pieces. You're going to need yourself at least 300 bismuth, 20 akirite. These are 2 new pieces of ore. And then there are 2 vendor reagents that you're going to need to pick up. So maybe don't buy these from the auction house, but frayed wiring and junk buckets. These will be available for purchase on the engineering profession vendor. Now, the process of this is mostly around discovery, and there's a few components to this that we should probably talk about in a little bit of detail so that you know how they function before we dive in. The entire system revolves around pile of rusted scrap. This stuff is a soul-bound crafting reagent. This is going to be problematic for players that don't particularly play engineering all that much, but if you've put engineering on your main, you'll probably end up with loads of this stuff. It randomly drops off mobs while you're out killing things in Kazalgar, and if it's a relatively well-played character, you'll end up with mountains of this stuff over time. But it should also be noted that nearly every single crafted item within engineering uses this stuff. So you are going to have to try and figure out some ways to get your hands on as much of this as possible. There are some ways to mass produce this. You can take materials and convert it into scrap, but it's quite a costly process, but I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So how are we going to get these first 40 levels done then? Well, I have documented all of this. I've written all of this down. There's a word version of this in my Goblin Guide to the War Within, along with the materials that you require, the full path, and then some hints and tips to get you going from 40 to skill 100. This little Goblin Guide of mine has been something I've been working on for a while. If you've seen some of my other leveling guides, you'll have been introduced to this. It's available to my patrons, my gold goblins over on Patreon. I will leave a link in the description down below if you're interested in checking it out. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to have some of this rusted scrap, and we are going to scour through it. This process of scouring will occasionally turn us up a prototype. It might teach us a recipe directly, or it might occasionally just give us a random ass grey item that we don't care about. We're going to do this a few times. We are going to need a little bit of scrap to begin with, 20 or so scrap to start learning a few new items. You can see here we learnt a prototype. We even got an unrecognizable prototype. Well, this is perfect for demonstration. This is. You can only see one prototype at a time. If you use this prototype, there's a strong chance that you'll then learn the recipe as well. This is how you go about learning new stuff. If I use the barrel of fireworks, we place it down. As you can see, we've now learned a new recipe. This is going to be critical for learning a bunch of stuff and progressing past skill 40. These unrecognizable prototypes, you can stack up a bunch of these in your bags. Once you've emptied your bags of any exposed prototypes, you can choose to use the unrecognizable prototype to figure out what it is. In this case, we got ourselves a potion bomb of speed. We can look to use one of those if we wish, and you can see we were lucky enough again to learn the recipe from that. So scouring through scrap is going to be how you discover stuff. So let's keep going with this a little bit. Let's throw a little bit of scrap into the mix. You will gain some easy recipes at the beginning. These are the parts. These are the core components you are going to be crafting a whole bunch of when playing with engineering. If we scour through enough scrap to get to skill 10, that's where our 45 initial scrap came into play, we can learn a few new things. The next thing we can learn is pilfer through parts. This is going to be an interesting one and a very useful one, is this allows you to take some of the parts that you produce here or find in the wild, because these can occasionally drop from things like treasures and the likes. You can pilfer through these as a way to recycle and generate some more of this scrap. This is how players are going to be able to produce the pile of rusted scrap if you are not really out in the world playing particularly. You could probably take something like bismuth bolts here, for example. This is the cheapest option. You can take 4 pieces of bismuth, you can make yourself a few bismuth bolts, and in turn you could then choose to pilfer those bolts to try and gain some scrap back. It's a, it's a semi-recycling based system, so that you can generate some rusted scrap, basically out of just basic auction house bought materials. We're not going to do much of this for now, but it's going to be very important to you in your later journey for engineering, so I thought it'd be worthwhile explaining here. Once we've reached skill 10, we're going to look at crafting up a bunch of these parts for the next stage. There are 3 parts you're going to need to make. You're going to need to make 80 bismuth bolts. I've already prepared 80 bismuth bolts here just for demonstration. You are going to produce 1, maybe 2 a time of these. Continue producing them until you have 80. 300 bismuth I recommended you purchase earlier should be enough to get your 80 bismuth bolts. Secondly, once you've finished crafting your bismuth bolts, you're going to need 20 gyrating gears. This is what's going to use a little bit more of that bismuth and some junk buckets. Once again, they produce 1 to 2 each and every time, but we need a grand total of 20 of them. And we're also going to need to produce 20 whimsical wirings. Once you've got those materials in place, I've actually purchased some off the cheap vendors on the beta here just for demonstration. Once we've got those, once we've crafted up a bunch of those, we should be able to both unlock the bismuth-fueled camouflage. I believe that's how you say that word. It's probably not, is it? You'll correct me in the comments section down below if it's not. But we're then going to look at crafting 10 of these, and this will get us all the way from skill 20 to 40. This is actually Engineer's tool, and the likelihood is you'll actually look at equipping one of these, as the tools in the War Within have significantly better stats on them than their Dragonflight versions. And this is a good time to look at replacing one. We craft 10 of these, we'll get ourselves all the way up to skill 40. We magicked an extra bonus knowledge point, skill point from somewhere there. It happens occasionally. But you should get yourself to about skill 40, and this is where this recipe will go yellow and will stop giving you skill points. From this point on, there is not too much you are going to learn from the trainer that's going to give you skill points, and you are at the mercy of your either inventing or prototype generation to try and get some more recipes. There are some other things that we should probably talk about. When scouring through scrap and once finding prototypes, let's see if we can stack up some prototypes. There is a recipe you can unlock called Disassemble Invention. I'm hoping it's randomly going to pop up here in a minute. It is seemingly quite random. If you do enough scouring through scrap, you'll get this Disassemble Invention. And what this is going to allow you to do, if the game would really let me learn it, is it's going to allow you to throw one of these prototypes in to break it back down again. This is sometimes something you might want to do if the prototype is just a basic one that you don't really care to learn, not something that you're spec'd into, for example. But it's also another really good way to generate hastily scribbled notes. Hastily scribbled notes can then be converted into these comprehensively organized ideas, and this is another way for you to slowly but surely learn a bunch of recipes. In true form, the game is not going to let me learn this naturally, is it? So luckily on the cheap NPCs we can showcase this. When you use a comprehensively organized idea, it's going to give you some options to learn a new recipe. There is a selection of recipes that can only be acquired via this method, and there's a selection of recipes that can only be acquired by the prototypes. So you are going to have to mix and match a little bit. What did we get here? We got a Bismuth Fisher Friend. That's a low-end fishing tool, convincingly realistic jumper cables, or a concealed chaos module. Obviously, it's up to you which one you pick, but you are going to learn something new. And from this point on, from 40 to 100, you are going to have to just basically work your way through methodically, trying to craft the things that you research. I have taken a little bit of a look through some of them to try and find some items that might be a little bit more better to craft if you can get your hands on them. One, for example, is the Algari repair bot. Where is he on our little list here? Algari repair bot. Where did you go? Here we go. This is a cool little dude. He's not particularly expensive to craft, but he's going to be at least somewhat useful for you. You're not going to be able to sell these on the auction house, but it's going to allow you to repair your equipment. A nice little utility item. If you can get this, it's relatively cheap to craft. Another one is going to be the pausing pylon. This is actually ever so slightly cheaper, but is then something that you can look at selling on the auction house. This is a good one if you can find the recipe for this to craft up from 40 to 100. Both of these will actually, they go yellow. They stop guaranteeing skill points at 80. They go green at 90, but if you craft enough of them, you can push all the way to 100 with these. Additionally, the profession crafting gear. This is a work order route, but engineering is responsible for making a lot of the the profession gear. Unlocking these recipes is actually also going to need you to jump into your spec trees. So just quickly make this a little easier to see. You're going to have to jump into your spec trees to learn these. If I can remember correctly, it's in, where did they go? Here we go. The engineered equipment tree, and you're going to have to spend some points and unlock the profession gear. Until you've unlocked this node, you cannot find the advanced profession equipment, the rare profession equipment. So if you are planning on going this route, make sure you get some knowledge points and spec in this direction first to be able to learn some of these recipes. These will give you guaranteed skill points for quite a while, and you can actually take these all the way to skill 100 if you wish. And the last thing I should probably point out is the original invent. This is a daily cooldown. It uses 25 scrap, and it will actually guarantee you 2 skill points all the way to skill 100. Whilst there is going to be a bit of a time restriction on doing this, this is one of the most cheapest and most reliable ways to get to skill 100. Every day you're going to learn something new by pressing this button. We got ourselves, the disassemble invention that we were looking for earlier. Of course we did. But you can see it's a 24-hour cooldown, so you are going to have to log in each and every day, but it's 2 guaranteed skill points all the way. Since we unlocked this, it's probably a good opportunity to showcase this. You can throw in an unrecognizable prototype, and when you break it down, you'll see you get a bunch of scrap back, a nice little way to recycle some of the stuff, and 6 of these hastily scrawled notes. Once you acquire 15 of them, you can convert them into the item that will give you choice of a new recipe. So that, boys and girls, is going to be what you're going to have to go out and do next. You're going to have to try and acquire yourself as many recipes as you can, slowly but surely chip away from skill 40 to 100. If you choose to try and push this and do this in one go, it's going to probably be quite expensive, and you're going to be trying to produce as much of this rusted scrap as you can, as fast as you can, but it is at least possible. There's a whole variety of recipes that will get you all the way to skill 100, which is at least nice to see. Thanks to Blizzard for not making it only one option, I suppose. But I'll leave it there for today, boys and girls. I hope that was at least useful to you. Consider checking out my Goblin Guide to the War Within if you are serious about doing any gold making in the new expansion. Of course, give the video a like. Consider subscribing if you're new around here. And I'll catch you all next time. Peace.